We go. Starting the afternoon session. Welcome back. Hopefully that promise of drinks and appetizers brought you back. All right, first session this afternoon, Facility Sustainment Investment Strategies. From left to right, we've got Bill Hawkins from the Air Force. Bill's responsible for Builder for Air Force, which he started in 2013. We have Tyler Jones from USDA. He's the builder manager for USDA ARS. Previously introduced John Crittenden from the Navy. And Julie Krebs, who is the builder program manager for National Nuclear Security Administration. And our moderator, Joe Allison from Alpha, technical director for Alpha. Alpha has been working in builder since 2015. The man who needs no introduction. Now that you've been introduced.
Thank you.
Take it away, Joe. Please welcome our panel.
So I've been told by a few that I'm to give a shout out to one of the people who are online that have been missing my questions this summit because I've been very limited in my amount of questioning, and that's why they've asked me to come up here to satisfy that concern. So, good afternoon, Jim. I hope you're online. That's all I'll say. All right. It's been my be able to moderate this panel is I'm excited about when I saw the topic, and especially having who we have on the panel, from Air Force to NNSA to Navy and also USDA. So I look forward to hearing what they have to say, and let's get started. Julie?
Okay. Well, sounds good. I hope you guys can hear me. So I have my little cheat sheet of my slides on my phone here, so don't think I'm like ignoring you actively while I'm talking. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so the NNSA program. So we actually started Builder in October of 2014, and we're actually hoping to implement all of our real property by the end of this fiscal year. So yay, 10-year milestone! Woo! Right? So we host our own instance of it, and we use Builder and we track everything. So if it's a real property asset, it's going into Builder. And so we've customized our Builder catalog, which is now 12,000 plus individual catalog items now to describe not only our buildings, trailers, and what we call other structures and facilities. It's all the stuff that's not a building or trailer. So it could be a parking lot, it could be a roadway, it could be a cell phone tower, all our utilities. All of that is going into Builder. And we'll have it all in, God willing, by the end of this September for that. So we're quite a bit smaller than several of the military agencies. So we have about 38 million active square feet that's kind of operating. We have a couple million more that is excess, or what we call shut down, the things that are awaiting disposition or transfer to another agency, the stuff we're trying to get out of. And that is a big effort that we're trying to do, is clean up a lot of those. So a lot of our facilities really have been around since the Manhattan era. So we have a lot of 60, 70, 80-year-old assets that we're just having to Band-Aid and make work. And so that was one of the big drivers to moving to Builder for us on there. And we have a lot of different capabilities. We try to look at how we do things through capabilities of what they're supporting. Is it supporting our plutonium mission, our global security? And so we try to group those and look at those assets sort of across multiple sites. We have 8 major NNSA sites. We're a little different, so we're managed by contractors. We only have 2 federalized sites that are managed that way, and so in the Builder world, we're a little bit more unique in that everybody kind of does things a little bit differently with a common goal in mind, and so we don't have the same sort of authorities to say, thou shalt all use Maximo or something like that. So it's really more of a performance base, so that gives us a little bit of flexibility on there. We've been trying to do various things to try to better invest in our assets, to meet a lot of these challenges that you see on there. And so we are trying to do more of like portfolio planning. In the past, a lot of our really large production level nuclear facilities were kind of managed by one side of the NNSA, where a lot of the mission enabling assets were kind of managed over here. We're trying to be more comprehensive and do it sort of a across the board way with similar metrics and similar tracking on there. We're doing a lot of different authorities that have helped us. We actually executed our first lease purchase, which was a new authority that we've kind of taken advantage of in 2021, and we actually have a new huge program at our Kansas City site where we're actually, a contractor's going in and building a whole new campus for us. We'll lease it for a time, then we're going to buy it. And this is like a new thing to try to have a new strategy, and that's been really helpful for us. We've also been working to raise our minor construction threshold with our investments. So, it was about, it was about, I have it, $10 million in 2017, which I know is, our authorities are much higher than a lot of the military, so you're probably going to be like, well, why can't you get it done at the same authority level we have? Well, we have a lot of extra regulations that make it really pain in the butt. So we've actually been stepping that up over the years. So our minor construction threshold is actually 33, 34 million now, and we're kind of working to try to get that even higher because it's really difficult to get a lot of our specialized facilities for less than that. And if we can get away with not doing as many strict things, it really frees us up in a lot of ways. So we have a lot of different strategies that we're kind of doing. One thing I had to note about this is we're really old, we're really decrepit, we really have important missions, and we're just trying to recapitalize that, and Builder is a big part of helping us to try to do that. So if you want to kick over to the next slide. So as far as our investment strategies go, so Builder really has helped us in a lot of ways. So one thing I think that we have a really good research opportunity for us is trying to decide, how long should an asset really last, right? So we've used the Builder systems, kind of looked at the major systems. What are the design life ranges that we have in the catalog? And trying to help that sort of drive our understanding of how often do we really need to renew or recapitalize these major systems within an asset before we really want to replace the asset as a whole. And so we've kind of looked at that, and we have that kind of documented in some of our practices. And so we've kind of leveled in on, I guess, about a 40 to 50 year design life range. We'd like to start gathering data to start seeing, okay, like an office building probably won't last the same as one of our major nuclear facilities. So we're trying to dial that in better, and Builder and other tools are going to help us do that. But we have what's called our master asset plan, or a MAP, and that's a way for us to basically look out 25 years to see where our investments really need to happen. And so we kind of bucket our assets into, okay, this is a new asset, it's new within 5 years, it's up and coming, it's sort of an urban planning strategy for us. We really focus a lot on our bridging assets because kind of based on this investment cycle, we really want to start planning for the new facilities about 20 years out from the old one going down, because it takes a long time to really get funding in place, the projects, all of that, so that we're not having to survive in these 70-year-old facilities and try to do all these modern things in them. So we're trying to get in a better cycle for doing a lot of that. And Builder has really helped us in a lot of ways better understand that. So I won't harp on that too much. If you want to go to the next one too. So the things that we consider when we're doing looking at our investments, I wish we had like a golden metric of like, hey, do this one calculation and then it'll just rack and stack it and that tells us what to do. We are just not there, and we have so many different things that we look at. And so the first thing that we really need to focus on is we really do like where our mission needs, right? What can we do today? Where are we going? We have a lot of big shifts in priorities for some of those things that we need to be real sensitive to on there. And as I say, we look at capability. It's not just, does this one asset meet? It's more of this shell game of across this entire capability, how can I move things in and out? If I don't have space at this site, can I move it over here? So it really starts with the mission need at first, and then we've used Builder a lot with the age and condition, right? So that's been a big piece for us, is being able to look at the condition index, where it's at, stacking it up to the age. Again, you can see that 47 is our average lifespan for our current assets, and that's kind of right in our window of when we want to be retiring these assets. So it's hurting us in some ways, and we're trying to get ahead of that. We also look things a lot at our systemed focus. So a lot of the ways we'll look at it is across our major systems. And we actually use that towards kind of that last bullet, is we are now kind of using Builder in a standardized way for our asset management program. So there are these ways to say, hey, can we manage similar things together? Like our ramp program is for roofs, right? So we see a roofing need across the entire complex. We get a centralized contractor to kind of manage it across all of our sites. And so we look at some of that to help us with our investment strategies of how can we get more more for less and more efficient in how we're doing things. So we're starting to leverage those and stand up some more asset management programs. Kind of our big metric we were looking at the past was deferred maintenance. It was kind of like, you know, in the 2018 NDAA, it was like Congress was like, hey, we don't really trust where your money's going. Like, where are you spending this black hole, and are you actually like investing it appropriately? And so they said, give us a metric that we can grade you on. And we said, well, hey, how about deferred maintenance, right? And it worked for a time, but it doesn't tell the whole story, right? So, I mean, it's a lot of, it tells us kind of what needs to be, you know, replaced and maintained, but it doesn't really, you might have high deferred maintenance, let's say, in an asset you are running to retirement. So who cares? Like, I'm intentionally running to retirement. That deferred maintenance doesn't tell the whole story. So we've since started to look at, in our 2022, update to, it's our infrastructure modernization initiative, basically telling Congress what do we want to be graded on now to see if we're investing appropriately. And now it's deferred maintenance over what we call replacement plant replacement value, same thing. So we're kind of looking at that ratio, and we were about 5% last year, and we're probably going to need to rebaseline next year because we actually used partial builder data, some when we did that. Now that we're going to finally have everything transitioned to builder by the end of this year, probably in FY25, we need to reassess what that is. Because when we get our utility systems in there, which are very expensive, and we're tracking against the builder way of doing things, I mean, that ratio is going to probably be like 1 in most of those, because they're 70, 80-year-old utilities, and that percentage is probably going to go higher. But the intent with our metric is we really want to get it more into the 2 to 3%. And as that percentage grows, it gets closer to or above 1. That's a pretty prime way to say, hey, I don't want to invest in this facility anymore because it's costing more to maintain it than it is to just replace something new. So it's something that we're looking at. We don't love that metric 100%, so we're still trying to incorporate how do we get condition and other things in there. We look at ability to replace. I mean, you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have the local labor market to support it or oversight to manage it, you can just dump money at the problem and still not get any ability to get the new assets. We look a lot at that. Being Department of Energy, we have a lot of sustainability and climate change initiatives, so that is a big factor for investment to determine are we meeting the latest regulations. And, you know, we always look at who's in the White House, right? So depending on who gets the White House towards the end of this year, some of these priorities may change. And so that is a big driver about trying to make sure that we're doing the latest and greatest and responsible things. So, you know, we kind of always talk about that 2 to 4%, you know, that came out with the National Research Council initially, right? Just saying, hey, we need some kind of maintenance per year replacement on there. And, you know, even with the update in 2012, it was like the federal agencies, nobody was doing 2% even then, right? And then the latest report that, you know, came out, thankfully our Livermore team had a big hand in writing that latest research. They were kind of looking at it and saying, well, we kind of need about 2.5%. And for the total NNSA, we invested less than 1%. And so we're not really able to keep up with the pace of things. So it's kind of a challenge, and we're starting to develop better metrics so we can kind of take a look at that from there. So I'm gonna let it go because I've talked a whole big bunch and pass it on to my colleagues. So
Thank you, Julie. I wanted to ask powers that be. You want me to not ask any questions till all 4 panelists are done? I mean, I have to stand up here the entire time and not ask a single question while they're talking? Is that correct? I mean, this is torture.
worst nightmare.
Well, we only got an hour, so.
But you can't stand up there and talk like the other guy did the whole time.
I'm not, so, I'd like to, so Julie has alluded to one of my questions, and these questions were already scripted by Digon, so I don't take any responsibility for the content of these questions. But she's alluded to it. It sounds like your NNSA is deriving their sustainment and R&M budget based upon a percentage of PRV. Is that correct?
In some cases we are, and in some cases, again, it plays into all of these factors on here. So, and it is something that we're trying to look at. I will say that the way that we actually track maintenance, we've got the actuals that we've spent on there, but every site still kind of plans for maintenance a little bit independently. Like, I would say our maintenance program is honestly very similar to where we were with Builder 10 years ago. Is every site is kind of calculating, how do I, anticipate what my maintenance needs are at the site. Some are using a percentage of RPV plus some additional factors on top of it. Some are just looking straight to their CMMS or, kind of saying, well, what did I spend last year? What do I know are upcoming projects? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to standardize that a little bit better. But right now it's kind of looking at all of those different factors and trying to play the game, the Shell urban planning game of, okay, what meets this need? Where do I need to go?
All right, thank you. I noticed you introduced some language in your first slide. Let me see if I can find it here. The language of the transition of building as they age. You've
Right.
introduced the concept of new, of course, that's not new, enduring, bridging, and excess.
Right.
I understood all three of those terms except the last one.
Oh, yes.
Give us some clarity on excess.
So for excess, we kind of have three asset statuses. We have operating assets, right? We're actively using them. We have standby, where we may not be utilizing them as much, or they're kind of sitting vacant, but we have to maintain them as if they were operating, because they could, the utilization could jump back up at any time. Excess or shut down, what we have is basically anything that we're not actively planning for anymore. So once something kind of goes into an excess or shutdown status, it's pretty much kind of going cold and dark. We do have some situations where we do have to kind of bring them back online because an anticipated project falls through, we don't get funding to actually get out of another asset. But most of the time, those are kind of ones that are kind of working to make cold and dark, we're working to decontaminate it, we're going to demolish it, transfer it to another agency, something like that. So
you have, they go from excess then to potentially being removed from your footprint, right?
Yep.
And that's through demolition.
Yep.
Are you finding it difficult to achieve funding for demolition?
Yes. Yeah, we've gotten some additional authorities where we can actually demolish within the NNSA to a higher dollar threshold if it's not contaminated, but a lot of our stuff is process contaminated, and so it kind of has to switch to another Department of Energy program office to kind of maintain and actually take down, or some things might just have to sit there in perpetuity. So it is challenging, and we don't have enough money to make our operating assets do what we need of them, so it's harder of an argument to say, take this down, but then you have the, wait, where's my footprint on there, right, too? Like, I need that space on my site to build. So it is often a challenging game to balance that.
So are you torn by the conflicting, so if your sustainment money is coming in based upon a percentage of PRV, is excess counted active in those PRV calculations, or does it get removed from that?
We do look at that. So not every component within one of our assets is going to be actively maintained. Some of it will just let it go to dust in the bunnies. Our Nevada site is one of the ones where it's out in the middle of the desert. It's like, okay, if it's not contaminated and I don't have to do it for a life safety or structural thing, just let it go to dust and we'll deal with it at some future date. But there are ones we actively have to maintain for structural integrity and safety and things like that. Or like I said, if it's contaminated, we need to make sure it's being contained so that it's not affecting workers or the areas surrounding our sites.
So how much of your budget is spent just maintaining caretaker status, as it were, for your excess buildings?
I mean, I would say it's significant. I wouldn't say it's substantial, but I'd have to look to my budget people to give me actual numbers for what that looks like. But it is definitely a consideration we have to do at each of our sites.
So would you conclude then that you have an opportunity to stretch your SRM dollars further if you were able to remove some of these excess buildings from active?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah.
that's a.
And the goal is, like I said, to try to get in a cycle of, again, sort of like that. You're not holding things in excess very long. The goal would be to have that only be maybe 2 or 3 years, between the one that was bridging to the one that, is going to replace it, and not having this, hey, I've got this 80-year-old asset, I've got things falling off the ceiling on our workers, but I just have to make it work because I don't have the money to get something new. And a lot of the authorities, the more expensive the project gets, the more rigmarole it has to go through with the red tape of, it gets very cumbersome. And a lot of the strategies that we've looked at too is, how do we build smarter, faster, and more commercial-like? Because for a while we were bogged down, we couldn't get anything done because we were trying to build an office facility just like we would a nuclear facility with all the same paperwork and regulations. And it's like, why are we doing that? Any one of your contractors probably go out and go build us this building, next year, and why are we taking 20 years just to get a design that's already, outdated by the time we get money for it? So we're trying to do a lot of streamlining efforts of having similar, 80% design solutions that we can just kind of plunk around, make things faster, try to streamline that which is more commercial, get it, design it and construct it that way, rather than, hey, this hotel is a nuclear facility, let's build it and it'll take 25 years and $6 billion, we're trying to be smarter with the limited funds that we get. And we know that we're probably not going to get a whole lot more. And again, we have to watch the White House too, because where do the priorities lie? I mean, that's a huge shift for us that, are we going to get more stuff to really recapitalize and modernize our facilities, or are we just, again, going to have to keep putting Band-Aids on 80-year-old assets?
It's the challenge we all face, huh?
It's terrible. Yep.
All right, so with Navy, I'm just going to jump right to the questions, John.
Sure.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
Okay. He's giving me a hard time because I think I gave him the slides and then I looked at the questions. I think.
So I got your first slide up.
Got to ask the question?
Yeah.
Pardon?
Are you going to ask the question first or no?
No, I'm
Same
gonna
question.
let him. Yes, they're same. Yeah. Each panelist will get the same. Well, no, they won't.
Yeah,
But
no,
they're
I
supposed
see-
to get the same questions. But we'll see.
I
All
see
right.
you've got our first slide there. So
Yeah, I do
I'll
have
get
it queued up
started.
for you. So let me know when to advance.
And I may touch on a couple issues that Bill may bring up later, but I'll start with the rules of thumb, then get into the investment strategy, and then some other tactics. So we receive from the powers that be, whatever you want to call it, but OSD gives the Navy 85% of the sustainment model, right? So don't think 100% FSM, think we start out with 85% of that model. Within that allocation, we reallocate on a tilted basis so that we're giving our most important missions and platforms a higher percentage of that allocation. So we then turn around and we call that 100% FSM for those very limited allocations. And then, of course, if you're going to give some people higher than 85%, then other people are going to be far below 85%. So by the time the regions dole out the money to the PWDs, you're looking at 73.5% of what started at 100% FSM. FSM, of course, stands for the Facility Sustainment Model. So sorry if I try not to use acronyms that are not defined. The Facility Sustainment Model, I think.
I could decode their slides,
did.
so that's
You
what
did.
he's referring to. But
True enough. And I think that FSM model is, of course, subject to change. It's at least 20 years old. And some of the models within that overall model are subject to improvement from each of the asset holding services, right? Primarily the MILDEPs. And so if you, as the Navy, happen to own the most facilities within the category of, say, dry docks, which we do, we set the model for dry docks. So the overall budget of 100% FSM and what that means, that obviously is subject to change based on these models that can be tweaked. Within the 73%, some installation commanding officers would probably scoff to hear, or PWOs, public works officers would say that we don't get 73%. We get below 60 or 70%. And I think it comes down to some other must funds and sometimes the way that ST is used for other things than PM and investment. But when you factor in preventive maintenance, one of our goals is to 100% PM everything that is worthy of being preventive maintenance, receiving preventive maintenance.
John, I have to stop you there. You said one of your goals is to PM everything that's due, right? That requires PM.
Right.
Are you
and not
achieving
to
that? Are you
fall
achieving
behind.
that goal?
Actually, by and large, I can't speak for every Navy region, but we've seen some very high rates of preventive maintenance, on-time completion, or maintenance that may be late but not skipped, right? So missed PMs is another thing we measure, and relatively between 0 and 5% missed PMs.
So how long have you been implementing and using Builder and the Maximo combination?
That started in 2016.
So you've been at it for
But don't
8
think
years.
of PM as having anything to do with Builder, because we don't.
I get that. My question would be, you're now achieving almost 100% PM compliance. Did your effective life of your items that you're PMing, did you see a change, or did you just hold the line on reaching design life?
That's a good question. We have not undertaken to study whether or not we're achieving or realizing greater design life longevity from, you know, if we rated a boiler as a 20-year boiler, we can't say whether we're getting closer to achieving that before we have to replace it. So I don't have the answer to that question. But there could be some innovation happening where people are studying that. We do request that that be something that, as an enterprise working group, we can think about as an ESMS working group. Next item that was more of a rule of thumb has to do with trying to make sure that, at least from a ROM, rough order of magnitude costing, we are planning more than we can execute. Now, it's not to say we want to waste planning dollars, but we're talking about creating project shells with some basic requirements. And when we say requirement, we literally mean reinvestment. Those are the deferred maintenance and repair needs, or it could be because of a functionality concern. But those requirements, they need to be 125%. In other words, if you have 4 quarters in a year, you need to plan for 5 quarters of execution. And if you receive swing money, we call that swing projects, we're going to be able to execute. So that is a rule of thumb, to just over-design each of the public works departments' maintenance execution plans. So their integrated prioritization list needs to be over-designed. So those are kind of the rules of thumb, you know, 60 to 70% ST, 100% PM rates, 125% MEP to what we call facilities SRM ratio, the budget. The next thing that I wanted to mention is we do have something called a demolition calculator. It's also called a divestment tool. It studies the facilities to see which ones are beyond economic repair, and usually they're going to be in the failing facility category. And we set about trying to divest those facilities through a couple initiatives. Administrative reset is one. Another one is the $50 million-ish that we have in our FY24 budget to demolish facilities. So if we can achieve that and we can easily document it, we're doing a good thing for the Navy. And at the very least, if we're keeping those facilities in a caretaker status, which I believe, by the way, at least in our formulas, 15% of the ST rate is allocated to caretaker facilities. But at the very least, we can eliminate any operating expenses for those facilities, which already arguably should have had all of their utilities secured, but you have to keep a facility from freezing, and there are certain things that cost money. So trying to get out of the business of keeping buildings that are complete drag do not provide any value. So those are some tactics. Then if we were to, so that I mentioned this is the waterfall of how the ST becomes whittled down to less than 70%. Let's move on from that to this slide. This is a lot to look at, I understand, on a screen. The policy on the left is in force. That's what we use today in our MEPs, what we call maintenance execution plans, and in the way we report to ultimately to OPNAV, Headquarters Navy, through each of the Navy what we call budget submitting offices. So it could be NAV Air, NAV C, the fleets, NAV SUP, NAV War. It could be, of course, the biggest customer, which is CNIC. And they're reporting how much credit they're investing in their targeted areas. So how much credit each PWD receives, and ultimately how that rolls up to, are we investing in the right areas? So again, we're trying to tilt the scale. So we want to make sure that we're putting our thumb on the scale for facility investments that are more worthy, more worthwhile. Are they in the targeted, in other words, CNO, Chief of Naval Operations, targeted investment mandate. So that's the strategy on the left. The strategy on the right is trying to invoke more of a condition threshold, condition challenging within the investment scheme. So again, all of our requirements in every project the Navy executes, whether the project starts out in this software known as e-projects because it's a larger project, or if it's a project that starts and ends within Maximo because it's a smaller project. Whether or not, it doesn't matter which system it's using, all of those requirements go into this topology, and you can see whether you're getting credited within those areas that are CNO interest areas. Go ahead.
Can I pause you, John?
Sure.
You have a highlighted item on that right-hand side. It says MSCI gets challenged, Master System CI gets challenged. Can you explain that?
Right, so if you're going to set about doing a project in, let's go below the top row, because the top row is not subject to those challenges. But any row below the top row, say within the area of D30, which falls in the D series of HVAC, if you're investing in a chiller and the master system condition index at that facility is already above an 85, you're not going to get credit for investing in that chiller. Okay, now that may seem a little unfair. It could be that the piping is a large expense of that facility and it's for some reason low condition. But usually the main drivers of the HVAC would be the main equipment that is cooling generating or heating generating. So the idea is you're not over investing in a facility that's supposed to be condition index challenged in terms of, is it below a threshold or above a threshold? Does that make sense? So there's always going to be exceptions to that, and we just have to work out how we're analyzing these things. But when you think about the cost, what's driving the cost of a HVAC system, most of that cost is in your plant equipment. So that's where that comes from, is having a condition index challenge. Same thing could go for plumbing systems, same thing for electrical systems. So those thresholds are there to make sure that we're doing wise things within our investment, within projects. Go ahead. Time? Okay. Oh, question.
Question.
No, I had an online question come in. Is there a standard for planning a project on project costs? Do branches use Builder while others use RS Means and others use PACES, P-A-C-E-S? Is there a goal to move towards a common project planning cost program across branches?
The answer to that is we do not try to limit what cost tools are available to the field. We in fact try to grow whatever capabilities that we have. So RS Means Online is available for people who are subscribed. There's also, within Maximo, we have a cost catalog. Also, of course, there's PACES and M2 and other systems, yep, that have the ability to do parametric estimating. And so we don't have a common system that we're going towards. I will say that there is something that the Army is developing called PACS, and that capability for special project package planning will allow for us to do a few things with costs. And I think Air Force is doing things similarly. So you can kind of marry up the PRV model for a facility if you're doing a holistic rehabilitation project to how you should allocate the costs within master systems. So there's just because there's so many myriad ways of doing cost estimating, we're not trying to limit tools that are out there for people to say you're going to go this direction. But what we do have is we have some KPIs that tell us, or in fact, I wouldn't even call this a KPI, more of a, it's not really used for decision making, it's used to evaluate ourselves. And so if we have a low, what we call inventory quotient for a facility, meaning if you were to divide all the cost of the builder components of that facility by the PRV and you get a very low value and it doesn't meet our completeness threshold, then you're probably not going to have a good cost estimate for projects at that facility. You're not going to be able to plan things properly. You can't report on what's needed for requirements. So we definitely, and we're not getting builder good analysis if we don't have enough value going into builder. So we have that thing called the IQ, the inventory quotient. We also have a master system quality index. So we're looking at all the master systems and comparing them to what for a normal model for that facility, say it's Child Development Center, should have in all of its areas, how does your facility look within the condition, or excuse me, within the inventory module? So there's other ways of looking at cost. The third thing I'll say about cost is unit costing. So we now have the challenging, and it's actually not that hard, to come up with a threshold for both B20 enclosure, B30 roof coverings, and say, with very few exceptions, that all of them can be subject to the same challenge of unit cost. And if you're above a certain amount of unit cost, you've done something wrong. The only exceptions to like exterior enclosure would be specialty doors, hangar doors, and exterior louvers. Okay, so I mean, sometimes those things go above a normal rate for reasons I don't want to get into. But unit costing is huge. We're going to start doing unit costing a lot more, and it'll help us QA the heck out of our inventory costs. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Yusuf Abid, Livermore. Does functionality play a role in your investment strategy?
So inevitably, there's going to be projects that happen to be developed because of the functionality, right? So, so many things could be capabilities driven or statutory driven, code compliance, modernization. So this rubric includes all types of investment from RM dollars, so projects that are coming from an RM budget, as well as projects coming from our special project sustainment and special and local sustainment projects. And of course, if you're another NAV beyond CNIC, you might have something called Navy working capital.
Zero in on my question a little bit more. Are you using the functionality module in Builder?
No, we've determined that it's too arduous, and it a little bit it replicates a process that we kind of already have called asset evaluations in the Navy, where we interview the tenants, we establish whether there are potential code issues, deficiencies. We apply those deficiencies against the CAT code utilizations.
On the spot still, but I'm going to keep driving. So that process derives modernization for you? Is that what I'm listening to?
Yes, the AE process definitely drives modernization.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. When you're evaluating, because we do a lot of this stuff, so when you're evaluating your PMs and the impact of the PM on the service life, are you keeping track of that information and data so that you can go back and do the analysis on it?
I would be open to suggestion if someone were to say to me, here is a way to directly proportionalize the PM performance to how much longevity did I buy or realize, right? So if there are research projects ongoing, send them to my inbox and I'll look into it.
For the sake of time, are you good on that focus for now? We got two more panelists.
Good morning, Julie.
All right, thank you. John,
that's about
do you want to go to the next
had.
slide, or are you done?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a lot to look at. This is more of an in-depth look at how that newfound policy on the right will play out and how it affects. Because some people will ask, well, what about things that are ancillary to the facilities, like the other built infrastructure? But we don't have time to get into all of these things. But I did want to put that out there. And then on the very last slide, this is just all about doing component-based requirements within our projects. And then the last slide is all about a new program, a new process that we have to evaluate structures and using Builder for structures on an age basing, which I alluded to in the earlier panel today. Thank you.
USDA is next. Tyler?
Good afternoon. I'm Tyler from USDA ARS, and for those of you who don't know what ARS is, it stands for Agricultural Research Service. So we're in charge of the research related to the United States agricultural products, whether that be grains, vegetables, fruits, livestock, all of that good stuff. I'm going to try and keep it quick, number one, because we're running behind, and number two, you're going to have to listen to me for a whole hour about our history and more in-depth sustainment process tomorrow at 1 o'clock if you stay for that. So to start off, we don't have a facility sustainment model. We don't get funded at a percentage of what our sustainment dollars is. We rely on the research dollars to fund that facility sustainment. So it comes directly out of their program dollars. Previously, we tried to set a goal of 4% of those program dollars going directly towards facility repairs. And we've noticed that that's just not enough. It's not enough to keep up with our deferred maintenance, and it's not enough to adequately fund those facilities. Moving forward, we wanted to go to a newer model, and as Julia alluded to, there's been National Academies studies and reports that have said 2 to 4% of PRV is about the right amount. We've tried to set the lofty goal of using 4% PRV. Our contractor, Alpha, has done industry research, and they've come back and said it's probably more like 4 to 6%. So we're trying to come somewhere in the middle. And one note is that's a lot higher dollar value than what we used to plan for at 4% program funds. So at least for the short term, we don't expect our locations to meet that 4% PRV goal to sustain their facilities, but we do want to start tracking it in comparison terms to that number just to see how far we are away. One of the new parts with this model is we're going to ask them to start tracking their O&M expenditures as well. And based on what Kurt and Matt said, with ESMS being able to plan work items for inspect and maintain, I'm personally excited about that because a lot of our locations don't have CMMSs, don't have good on-site facility maintenance personnel. A lot of times they're contracting that out, so they don't have good O&M plans set up to really nail that down. The last bullet point on this slide is one thing that we kind of do have going for us is we partner with a lot of universities, and we partner with a lot of lobbying groups. Say like in Houma, Louisiana, they partner with the Sugarcane League, and those universities and those lobbying groups can get to congressmen probably a little bit better than most of the federal agencies. And we use deferred maintenance as the metric for them to request sustainment dollars specifically from their congressman. I mean, the location isn't on that request directly to the congressman, but they give it to the university, they give it to the lobbying organizations, or if a congressman ever comes out and asks directly, they'll provide it. But that's one of the things that we do have in some instances. I mean, that all depends on the congressman and what their priorities in those districts are, but it's probably a little bit different than most of the other agencies in this organization. You can go to the next slide. So this is an example of a dashboard. We use Tableau, and this is how we measure our locations to how well they're meeting their plan. This is an example of our repair dashboard, and you can just kind of see a spending track of whether they're meeting their monthly goals, their yearly goals. And then you can hit the next one. And here's another example of a O&M dashboard, operation and maintenance dashboard. And it's the same type of thing, like where the money's going, whether or not, how much is getting spent each month, and then what the breakdown is between O&M and utilities. Go ahead. This is kind of pretty high level. So when we do our capital investment strategy, one of the big metrics that we're using out of Builder for sustainment is the condition index. And we compare that to our program priority for each of our research units at all of our locations. And that upper left quadrant is where they want to be to compete for major renovation, major repair dollars to ask from Congress. That upper left quadrant is high program priority and low builder condition index. With that, I don't have anything else to add.
One thing that's unique about USDA is your percentage of PRV that you're using to plan your budget, right, or to fund from. Your PRV values are not handed to you by another organization, is that correct?
Correct. We're trying to use the component replacement value out of builder to equate to our PRV, and that is the number that we report up the chain to Congress to tell them what our PRV is for locations that have completed builder assessments. For the ones that don't, we still use our real property system for that.
Thanks, Tyler. Bill.
Yes, sir.
Air Force.
Yep. Air power. Sorry. I'm a jarhead. I'm not an Air Force guy. So we got the questions. How do you want to do it, Joe? My slides have the question and then go into the next one. Okay? Like I said, I'm not the smartest knife in the drawer, so. And I can't read that, and I wasn't smart enough to bring my phone up here and tell you what my slides are. So that's the first slide, and that's the first question, whatever it says. I think it's got something to do with how much we're investing, because I wrote my notes down.
What rule of thumb for facility and reinvestment?
There you go. So the studies we've did, Julie heard it, everybody's talked about it. 1.5% to 2.5% is what we think of the PRV. But go ahead and click the slide, Joe. But we have a heck of a time even getting to 1%. And that line that's at the top, on that top graph, that very, very upper line there, is above that line are things that we have to repair that are funded. Below that line is all the stuff we have that is not funded. Okay? So we can't even get to 1%, let alone 1.5, 2.5, or 4. Holy cow, man. I'd love to see something like that.
So, but when you say you can't get there, Bill, that's your allocation constraint coming from
Right,
the
from
DOD,
Congress.
right?
DOD, yeah. And I think that's where John and I have the same parity there, because you guys have the research part and the other pieces you get a little bit better off than we do. The ones down at the bottom, now that's interesting. That slide is interesting because all that kind of yellow, and I'm colorblind, I'm red, green, brown colorblind, so to me it looks like mustard, but each of those are MAGCOMs, major commands for us, and the yellow is everything that we have that is in amber condition or failing, starting to fail. And so you see a lot of amber up there, and that indicates, like Julie was saying, her facilities, and John saying facilities that have been around since the 1940s, 1950s. And that's kind of our problem right there in a biscuit, right there. You want to go to the next slide, John? So then that was the second question. And I think it says, well, John or Joe, you want to just ask it for me, please?
Has the model changed based on usage of SMS tools? In other words, having Builder, what's changed over?
Not as much as we like, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to knock Matt. I love you to death. But there's a lot of stuff that we bought in when the mandate came out in 2013. We jumped. The Air Force is die on your sword, kind of follow a command type of thing, and jumped on our sword and said, we will have this done. And we followed the mandate, kinda. As I said, I'm a jarhead, so we go with an 85% solution, and we said, it says every facility and every facility component. We can do every facility. We can get all the facilities we have in the Air Force into Builder, and we are not going to be able to get all the components in there if we, by ourselves. So we did by contract. The first contract we did was SIA 1, Sustainable Infrastructure Assessments 1. We told which a lot of the contractors are in here, and I've known you for a few years now. Frank, over here. A lot of you, I appreciate all of you. But we got some good relationships with them. The problem is our scopes of work weren't the greatest. And so when they went out and they started collecting the data, we were getting data on all, first we were doing distress ratings the first time we went out there. Distress ratings take a very long time, a lot longer than a direct rating. And so we automatically started running out of money. SIA 1, we got good data from them. Then we did SIA 2. SIA 2, we said we're going to go out to more bases. And some brilliant jarhead that was in charge of the program said, okay, we'll go out to all these bases, but we're only going to focus on these certain systems that are the ones that are costing us the most money, the mechanical type systems that we have. And we'll tell the bases, hey, look, you've got a foundation. Yes, you need to have it in Builder. You've got exterior walls. Yes, you need to have those, or the structural walls. You need to have those in Builder. But you can do that in a couple years. You have 5 years to be able to get those in there. Unfortunately, I left in 2016 and went supposedly to go incorporate Builder into the Army. But when I got there, nobody was really interested in doing that. And so I went ahead and I moved back to the Corps of Engineers and went down to Central America for 5 years before I came back here. So that's the slide there. So go ahead and go to the next one, Joe. Okay, so what we did, and this is ingenious. For anybody out there, I would tell you this is ingenious. We told the bases, okay, we're going to hold 10% of your funding, your PRV funding. We're going to hold that back, okay? And when we hold that back, what we're going to do is we're going to tell you, okay, we're going to look at your data in Builder. We're going to look at quality metrics. How many systems have you done within, you know, what you've got in there? In the first, and you guys that were our folks that were on my SIA contracts, you saw this a lot. The bases, when they were first doing it, we were getting a lot of errors, human errors. You'd have a building that was built in the 70s, and you had equipment that was in there, and the quantity was 1972. You know, a lot of stuff like that, just blowing the heck out of our component replacement values. And so what we did is we said, okay, we want to know that you've got the right quantities. We have a few things in this data quality that we look at. And one of those is what do you have in there? Limited use on general, unknown, and other. We would prefer the general because I don't think anybody explained it, but it's kind of the average of an other and an unknown. And so, and like Paul said, if you're there, you should probably know what the unknown is anyway. But so we try to stay people away from unknown and other. And then what we did, you can see that lump from 2021 to 2022. Boy, we got a lot of compliance because a lot of people wanted their 10% back, you know, okay? So you can say that it was a carrot or the stick, but it was a crick or a strat because it's their own money, right? Okay? And so that really helped. And that's been really a helpful deal. And so that's what we're going to continue to do, I think.
So just to clarify what I think I'm hearing, Bill, as a result of the carrot and the stick, you had an overstatement of almost $4.5 billion
A third.
in CRV value due to errors, data quality errors.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Probably. That's probably where that really comes from, Joe. That's a very good point. But it was improving the data quality that we had in Builder is where that goal came back. Exactly. All right, next slide. All right. These again are the conditions, the colors down below. And so up above, we call it a CTO, Construction Task Orders, our contract projects. So up above are in our CTO program, and they're really scrutinized really well. But those are still a lot of ambers that are in there that are not, you know, really not being funded or not getting the love that they need. The three slots down, the three pie charts down below are not in our CTO program, which doesn't get as much scrutiny. And so you see a little bit more reds in there, or your greens, whatever that is, the other color besides the yellow. Sorry, I told you I was colorblind. So, but that's that issue there. Next slide, Joe. All right, this one is pretty cool. If you look on the axis on the bottom, it's at 55 is our condition index, where we break down failing. Is somebody saying something to me? Oh, that's voices in my head. Okay. Sorry, echo or something. So the axis on the x-axis is condition index, the y-axis is MDI. So we consider 80 and above a high MDI, and we consider degraded after 55. So you can see on this graph a couple things. One, we have a lot of critical facilities that have good, in the upper right-hand corner, a lot of critical facilities that are getting a lot of investment and a lot of love, and yet they're not degraded. Okay? And that's a problem. That is a definite problem with what we're doing. We have a rotational thing where our command rotates in every 2 years. Every darn 2 years, we're renovating the wing headquarters. We're putting in money to make the places better for the different rotation folks that are coming in. The line on the left is even a better story, because like Paul said, it's very hard to get to a 0 condition index. You got to be lying to get to a 0 condition index, really do, okay? And so that's what that indicates. And look at all those critical facilities that are in the upper left-hand corner. Way a boatload of them, 100 tons of them are in there. And all those critical facilities get pencil whipped to say that their condition index is really horrible. And we go back, the lovely 3 there that are the Searle guys, the data helpers there, we go back and we ask them, hey, can you pull us some data that was maybe a year ago from there? And we're pulling that data, and we're exactly pulling up the rug, and you're seeing all the dust bunnies underneath the rug. And so that's a problem. That's a really big problem for us. Next one. What's the question, Joe? I'm sorry.
This question is, does this model change based on the age of the facility? So you're using, what is
Okay.
your methodology?
So again,
have you
Paul
adjusted it as your building's age?
Paul walked out, but I wanted to get him on that. There he is. Good timing. Paul. We, the Air Force, do not consider age. Okay? We're more focused.
I'm going to go back in the lobby now.
No, sir. No. We're more focused on serviceability. And I will tell you a story. I told a few of these guys here. We have Cheyenne Mountain. And inside Cheyenne Mountain, if you haven't seen Stargazer or Stargate, whatever that show was, Stargate, yeah, thank you, Joe. It's a big base inside a mountain that's built to withstand a nuclear bomb and still function. And so there's a whole bunch of, basically, just to be simple about it, a whole bunch of connexes back in there, and it's a little city of 13 little connexes with 3 extra little connexes that somebody would come in on a big red, white, and blue plane sometime in an event and maybe fly in there and go back in there. So the back part of this mountain is very sensitive, and it had an old scrubber, an air handler scrubber to clean, because they drive in this place, the inside there. And we were doing the assessments, and we come in the back, I'm going in the back, and I get back there, and this air handler is old, really old. It had been there from the very, very beginning. And we're walking with the guys do the maintenance on them and everything. And I was like, whoo! And I've been to antique cars, and I was like, wow, that thing is fantastic. Is it, you just didn't remove it because you can't get it out of here, or what's going on? And he looked at me like I was who I am, and he said, what do you mean? And I said, that thing, does it run? He said, oh, Betty runs perfect. I said, Betty? You've named her? You know? The guy was a machinist, and to the point I'm saying to Paul is there was no way the thing had parts anymore left. So serviceability was not going to be something you could do with this thing. But he was a machinist, and the guy was machining his own pulleys, his own parts, everything he had to keep this thing running. Now, he'd been there 30 years. 2 years later, he was gone. I don't know what they did with the thing. You know, they probably pulled it out and replaced it, you know. But serviceability is the thing that we have, okay? Because what happens if you don't have parts for something and it breaks? What do you have then? An emergency, right? Right? Well, who the hell wants to be panicked and be reactionary for emergencies? So we don't do that. So we look more on serviceability. And we try to say, you know, like Paul said as well, we have, every agency has their own definition of the direct rating conditions. And so we just say green means it's running, it's operable, amber means it's got a little bit of impaired operating, and red means it's not operating at all. And then we go over for the descriptors and say, okay, serviceability. Does it have some wear? Is it serviceable? What do we have in there? And that's how we bring that down. Our problem that we have on this is we've reduced our manpower and a lot of DOD, not just us, but we've reduced our manpower and our fighters and all of our stuff that we have by about 40%. But in that time, we haven't demolished and consolidated anything. And so we're still, I say people are like water, you know. They flow into an empty building faster, and I was a BCE and I was a DPW. They're flowing into these empty buildings before I can get my guys in there to pull the furniture out, you know. And you got to stop that, you know. We just got to stop that. We get people that are so used to having, you know, a 20 by 20 office, and then comes out and says, okay, you're only authorized a 10 by 10. Well, I'm going to go to mama and scream at mama. Okay, well, that guy won. Go find something else. Okay, so number 4, what was that one? Oh, no, don't go to 4 yet. Don't go to 4 yet. Okay, yeah, okay. That's not mine, is it? What is that one? What's the question? What was the question? Sorry, I should have my phone here. What is it, Joe?
So
Somebody over there read it.
I jumped
Joe,
ahead on you, Bill. Does this model change based on the age of facility? I think we asked that,
We answered.
right?
I sent that.
So now we went to the model change. Now that last question was number 4.
Okay,
right?
so
is there a different sustainment model when service life
don't
is
click
expended?
it. Don't click yet.
I'm
okay.
not.
Okay. So that's my closer. Can't give you my closer right off the bat, right? Okay. So one thing I will leave you with, that I believe when we first started, like I said, I first started Builder in 2012 with the Air Force. One thing that I would say is we were at the time using a maintenance management system that was being phased out. And we had IBM, Tririga, Maximo, whatever you want to call it at the time, and they're all kind of the same model or based on the same model engine. The guys come in and said, hey, we can do facility condition assessments, all this other stuff. And of course we just said, well, you can do all that, but we have an OSD memo that says that guy in the back is the guy we have to use, okay? They creatively said, the memo just says you have to have an FCI generated out of Builder, you know, or in Builder, loaded into Builder. So their method of going through and actually generating all the work and everything that actually happens in the field at that level and then putting the data into Builder is actually pretty slick and is something that I wanted to do. And I'm an old sheep herder from the state next door here in New Mexico, and it's sheep herder mentality. You're not going to get a bigger sheep or more wool by weighing it, right? Or measuring them or measuring their weight or length of the hair. You get bigger sheep by care and feeding, right? If you don't care and feed for our data, we don't care and feed for our maintenance, we don't care, do the PMs and do the things that we need to do, which is the more important part of SMS. And I believe in you, I love you, you know, I'm not downgrading, right? But when we get work that's coming out of Builder that's repair, replace, or paint, that's hard. That's a hard thing to do. When you can get out of your work management system the actual work, take those work items, build those work items, build projects. Army uses GFibs, they do the same type of thing. They're building those projects in that CMMS and then report it back. That is, to me, a perfect little situation. Now, I'm on board with the SMS because we didn't have an SMS for utilities. And so, like Matt was showing, we have a whole lot of different, they have a whole lot of different modules that are in there. And those, we needed that to happen. We went out to, by contract again with the utilities, segmented everything out, and did condition indexes in there, and then have all that data in GIS. And now, for the last 5 years, we've been working with Matt and the crew to get that data into the ESMS. And so, ask the question again, what do you do with that if you don't have the model?
Right. Is there a different sustainment model when your service life is expended?
Go ahead.
Oh, you want the next?
Yes, sir?
You ready?
I am.
All right.
I'm not going to say anything. Because that's what we do. You know, when we don't follow what we're trying to program, it's a couple people going, and they're panicked, guys. So, so what do? Well, we panic. Who spends right when, you know, the wife doesn't send me to the grocery store empty with an empty stomach. She knows, okay? Because I'll come back with all kinds of crap that was not on her list. And she said, why? Well, I was hungry when I got to that spot, and I needed these. I want these. So the problem is we need the builder program because, or the ESMS, because it's mandated. It's because what they want, Congress wants, and DoD wants us to have, and we don't have. And this would probably be a good topic for later, Kurt. We don't have a discussion here at all about the new DoDI that's coming out that is going to mandate all of us to use the SMS and be a lot more directive than that 2013 memo came out, okay? If you haven't heard about it, you can look me up. I'll get you a copy. Any one of us, I think, can get you a copy of that. At least John and I can get you a copy of that. I think Julie's got it. And that's about all I have. I appreciate it.
I do have one comment regarding Mr. Hawkins. He said something that I took umbrage to. He said nobody in the Army would listen when he was trying to get us involved with Builder. And I was listening. I drank the Kool-Aid in 2015, and then I was at the training he did at Fort Belvoir, and I was listening. And, I don't know if you remember that.
I do, Joe. Thank you.
So anyway.
I'm a good entertainer.
so
I'm stupid as hell, but I'm an entertainer.
Look, I was just going to tell him, Bill, look what you've done.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
So I wanted to thank all the panelists. This was fun. It is hard. It's a lot easier to go to the mic and ask a question from down there than to do this. So everybody that's been up here, I have just increased my admiration and respect for what it takes to do something like this. And also this, sitting here and trying to keep tabs on where you're at without seeing the screen, that's a pretty big challenge. So something to think about for next time is maybe we can have another screen available for the panelists to see if we're going to do this format.
Like we did in August at the assessment, we had remember, Matt, you put that panel here in front of us, and that helped. Yeah. I should have seen they had a phone and grabbed my phone, so it's my fault. But, yeah. And you had good notes, at least.
So we're way over time.
Yeah.
But there's a question that I wanted to ask the audience and the panelists, and maybe somebody can answer it someday before this summit is over. But is anybody tracking their SRM spend in such a manner that you can actually see whatever KPI is important to your organization, you see the value of that spend? So let's say 22, we spent X amount of money. We saw our KPI or KPIs change as a result of that spend, and now we can use that part of our story for justifying next year's budget, right? Is anybody doing that with Builder? I mean, the potential's there for us to be able to provide that type of feedback, but I just want to know, anybody on the panel, or is anybody in the audience that's currently able to do that with their SRM spend or whatever you want to call your spend?
I'll say that we're getting close. We have something called the condition index trend for task critical assets, and but it's still too large of a data set. So you have to narrow down to a portfolio set or a mission set that you can actually visualize changes in. Now, maybe some data scientists could tell us how to do it better, but we're trying to get to a place where we can say, all right, for this investment profile, this was the condition behavior, this was the trend behavior of the facilities involved with that investment.
I do know that the people pulling the purse strings are asking that question.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
And we're doing the same thing. We have what we call the enterprise health assessment that the 2-star or the 1-star that we have right now, the civil engineer instituted about a year ago. And we're getting questions on, they're primarily focused on, has anything gotten above 80%? Have we improved over 80%? And they're tracking that pretty closely right now. It's kind of like John said, it's a big beast, and so we're trying to eat it in little baby bites. But yeah. Question? Good.
So let's give a hand to the panel.
Thank you, panel. My favorite part was Joe actually having to cut off questions from the audience.
So just for those online, Paul was back there doing this to me. So I had to play the bad guy. Because I was like, you're asking me to cut off a question.
I know.
I was like,
I know.
I can't do it. But
All right, we're going to do like a 2-minute break just to change out mics, and we're going to come right back, so don't go far.